Thank you, Peg, and welcome everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speakers. And a lot of what we're trying to do with the organization is bring topics that are timely to the students that we're working with. And like Peg mentioned, prior learning assessment didn't happen overnight. This has been ongoing for quite some time. And what I wanted to share, College of DuPage and many of your schools in here are part of this alliance that Meryl and John are going to speak to you about today. It's very well that our institution shortly will be working with a process in place because of the work that Meryl and John and their committee are doing to look at what our adults are learning outside of the classroom and how that translates when they come to our respective institutions. So I'm going to let John and Meryl tell you more about this alliance that's been formed. Sometimes I'm always amazed. There's different things going on. I know I get mired in my own little world at College of DuPage sometimes, but there are things on the state level, the local level. I think I can't wait for you to hear more about it. So without further ado, I want to introduce Meryl Sussman, who's the Assistant Vice President, Outreach, Adult and Non-Credit Programming at NIU, and John Cowan, who is a Senior Research Associate at NIU, and they're going to tell you more about this alliance. And Meryl used to work at College of DuPage too, so I always have to put that in. So thank you very much, and I'm going to let them take it away.
Wait for the green button.
Are you green?
I'm green.
All right.
We were glad to be invited. Actually, can everyone hear me? Can you hear me in the back there? Good. Okay. As Angela mentioned, I have a long career at community colleges in 3 different states, from New York, LaGuardia Community College, if you've heard of them, to Massachusetts, the largest community college in Massachusetts, Middlesex, at 6,000 students. Think of the scale. And then a College at DuPage. And NIU was actually the first university I worked for, so the climate change was quite dramatic. But the idea of credentials for adults who are learning in other than collegiate settings was something that was ongoing for years. Particularly the first, I think, large-scale group were the veterans. And we had a Air Force base near Middlesex Community College, so we were dealing with this. Come to the university at Northern, and I know the wave is approaching us, and it was time for us to start conversations. So that's a little bit about my background. John, would you like to?
Yeah, and I came on board a couple of years ago and started working with Meryl and do a lot of the investigatory research on what we're talking about, because I think language is important. I think terms are important. So when we say adult learner, what do we mean by that and things like that. So I've been engrossed in clearing up concepts about what we're talking about as we move forward with this.
And John's research background is something that we're going to avail ourselves of as we move forward. I mean, the CALE study did a national study, but it would be really neat if we engaged as a group and started studying what happens when certain policies are in place, and then begin to tell those stories. Because I think that, in a way, you stole our thunder. The statistics that emerged from the CALE study were dramatic. And even though, as someone pointed out, it's 6 years ago, I mean, we don't have the means to do 62,000, tracking 62,000 students, but there's no reason to assume that the benefit to our students would be different as we emerge with a collaborative work on what we mean by prior learning assessment and how a student can carry those credits through our system. So that's what we want to focus on. Okay, I think we all know this, right? That the traditional student is not really the traditional student. In many campuses, the adult learner is the new traditional, and they're calling it post-traditional, because they are the people who might have interrupted their educational progress to go to work, to have a family, and now they're returning, and they find themselves on a campus that is really still set up for the 18 to 22-year-old. And Northern was no different. I mean, we actually did a study to find out there are over 2,000 adult learners on our campus in DeKalb during the day. And that shocked people, because under the fraternities and the athletics and all that was this mass, and they weren't all veterans, of other students who were moving through the system, sometimes feeling quite isolated. So we wanted to define terms. Now, for us, for the group of people that we're talking about it, we wanted to clarify that we're talking about a process by which a student could be awarded credit, that's what credit for prior learning, for post-secondary learning that took place in a non-collegiate setting. So we're not talking about students who might be let's say in a GED program, I'll put a proviso there, or an ESL program. But at the time they emerge ready to do post-secondary work, they might have credentials that they could use in certain skill areas to earn credit. So for a university, it was very important that we say to our faculty, this is post-secondary learning. We don't want to use experience, because they don't want work experience, they want the learning. And that it be at a high enough level that it would equate to credit in a university or in a college. Now, how do we acquire it? Well, this was really the way we were looking through it. We have little islands within the university that have already started doing this. For example, certifications. We have a bachelor's of nursing for RNs. Well, as soon as the RN comes into our program, we're granting them credit for all their clinicals, right? Because our students and those students sat for the same exam. They're registered nurses. So there's no way we're going to say you can't apply your clinical rotations and all those credits and those courses into our degree. What we do is we add on administrative, supervisory work, institutional management to their RN. So we know there's industry certifications, there are corporate training. We have students entering a program where their degree could be in fine arts, but their work for the last 15 years has been in web design. And so we look at the industry certifications they've achieved, military training. We're approaching it because we have to do a little more, I think, knowledge building on campus, what ACE certification is. But there are pockets of people looking at the training and saying, oh my gosh, that's equivalent to my XYZ course. Self-guided study, it's a little tougher now because there's no little box of an external rater in any way. But we're talking about people who become experts in certain areas and they've done it on their own. And so the question is, how do you establish evaluation of that? Volunteer service is similar. PLA methods, many of you already have these. A student walks into a community college and you have, they present you with a certification and you have a history of this is worth X credits in this program. Exams. Most of us have we accept certain exams, CLEP exams, AP exams, but there could be other exams where even final exams given by instructors and say, if you can pass this final exam, I'll give you credit for the course. By the way, there's also demonstrated competency. I remember when I was at COD and I had a student come up and he had a whole batch of automotive credits that were listed as demonstrated competency. So I called up the coordinator of the program and I say, how did this happen? This man comes in with like so many credits. He says, well, I put him over there and I gave him a car to repair and I watched him work and I said, he really does know how to do those things that we cover in those courses. Besides the fact that I had GMC certifications but it was funny. That was my first lesson on using demonstrated competency. There are colleges and universities that will go out to a site and evaluate a corporate training program and say, we will equate this to several courses. One thing that came to my attention, and I don't know what the current status was, Hamburger University for one. They were looking for a university to come in and look at their training and say, is this equal to management? Yeah, I mean, that's an example of that situation. Individual portfolios we put at the bottom. And the reason we did that is probably the most onerous task for a student. And that would be the last choice that I would impose on a student who is already in classes, to say, now you have to prepare a portfolio. Also, when we went to a national conference, they warned us. They said, you remember, that is a text-based, writing-intensive experience. They will not let their students do it until they've completed a full year of comp, because they don't want anything disqualified because it wasn't written well. And you have to coach through it. And if you've explored the CALE process, it's costly to set up a coach, an advisor. So it seems that most of the institutions said if a student can qualify through any of these relatively low cost, more formalized process, that would be the first choice. And then if someone presents a unique portfolio. Now, we have some programs that are considering giving credit for prior learning, and they were going to require a portfolio, but the preparation of the portfolio is part of a course. They want a student, they're in a field where portfolio preparation is critical to your professional status. So they're going to help the student, as part of the course, put together the portfolio, and then a faculty committee will evaluate it for credit. So that's a different experience, obviously. That's a learning experience that prepares you for professional advocacy when you go out and you're getting a job. And so they, in an art field, for example, this is common. You have a portfolio class, and they judge it, and they help you put your best foot forward. Okay.
Yeah, and I just, I guess this might be in summary of what Meryl was saying, is the experience that we've had is that it really is a continuum. And as you go up the continuum, there's a greater richness in terms of what you can award credit for, but the more onerous and more complicated it becomes. And so at the university, for instance, after some struggling with how do we start this conversation, what we've settled on is we're going to look at examining in whatever ways, expanding in whatever ways we can our credit by examination offerings, because that's something that's in place. And so that's an easy transitional step to increase that by looking at some ways we can accept training that's already standardized, already assessed, already evaluated. So you can see that that is a smaller step, but it's an easier step. But simultaneously, we're also working on portfolios, because we have an interest in portfolios, and we can see at some point these are really going to be important, and we don't want accepting portfolios in terms of evaluating them for credit to be the first experience that we have with portfolios. So hand in hand with that, we're starting some portfolio work with our UNIV courses, which are the courses that are taken by every incoming freshman. And we're doing a pilot electronic portfolio offering where people who teach that class have agreed to do an electronic portfolio for the class. And so we're going to be building portfolio capacity as we do these simpler steps, so that if we ever do get to where we can take a more comprehensive step, we'll have some work done.
So one of the things I just want to mention, because I want to come back to it later, it's the idea of we are preparing, and John is spearheading this, a introduction to returning to school, which will include the preliminary development of a portfolio and discussion of career development for adults. It'll be a low-cost, non-credit experience. We would love to have other people promote it, because we would want to do a beta test and have feedback from the participants of how well it helped them. But part of the goal there is to welcome adults and to really help them understand where they are in their career. So you're partnering with a career development expert, and also to have them begin a preliminary assessment of their next steps and build confidence that they can handle it. And oh, by the way, it's going to be partially online, so they can feel comfort with that technology, learning online. So it really is going to be and they will build a community. We've done a little bit of this already, and we've tested it out at single events. And one of the high marks for all the participants is I met people like me that are grappling with the same questions, and I want to stay in touch. So that would be, and what we would like to do is, through your group, to basically invite people. We're looking at how much it costs us, and that's we're not going to make money on it. The goal is to hold down costs, make it something that an adult say, this is at a good time, I need to do this because I really want to jumpstart, but I want to get a sense of where I am and where I want to go, and this seems like an easy to do thing.
The thinking behind that was that my background is in distance education. That's my primary area of expertise, and I know from working with adults in the past that we know that adult learners, online education is something that will be attractive to adult learners because they are family people, they're heads of households, and they want to be able to go to school and have it be as convenient as possible. And my experience tells me two things. One is they need that community, and some people don't know that they need that until they get in and experience it. They don't know what life is like until they've been connected in a cohort. And the other thing is that it can be difficult if you've been out of school for 20 years to think about, how do I go online? What does it even look like? I have no idea what to do. And so, as Meryl said, I found a colleague from the College of Education who's an expert in career counseling, and I'm going to teach the distance ed part, and she's going to teach the career. The technology has to be about something. So I'm going to introduce them to online learning, and the content is going to be career counseling.
And we'll get the word out through Angela, so you could broadcast it, and we'll have flyers that people can just go on and sign up for it. And as I said, there'll be some cost attached, but we're trying to keep it down because we want to make sure that we meet our costs. I think you take over on this one?
Yes. And actually, this is just some statistical data for things that we've already stated earlier about the shrinking cohorts of students coming out of high school and the growing numbers of adult student populations.
And some of these numbers are older, but what I think is very telling for those of us who've been in the field for a length of time, we knew this. We knew it was coming, and back in the day, you go back to 2009, there was already that trend, 38%. Now it's up to 44%. And we know there are campuses all over the country where they'll say the majority of their students are over the age of 25.
And that's,
24.
And I think it's interesting now, I know that we have a representative coming from the governor's office to NIU tomorrow, and they want to hear more about adult learners. And so that tells me that, the iron might be warming up right now. So it's a timely topic as well, it seems. Go ahead. In the name of coming up with a definition, some of the initial research that I did looked around for what do people mean when they say adult learner. And we stumbled across this Penn State definition that really encompassed a number of other definitions. And so we sort of adopted it as our working definition. So if we were sitting around at our adult learner subcommittee and we were talking about adult learners, we were basically talking about this type of person. What's interesting about this is that you don't have to be all of these, you just have to be one of these. Okay, so if you're any one of those things, you can be considered an adult learner by this definition. And go ahead.
And I know that at community colleges, people entitled to benefits under adult learning grants are younger. But this is a consistent university definition if there are centers for adult learning on a university campus, or if they're doing a census of who are their adult learners. This is similar to the CALE definition also, the fluctuation of a year or two. So this is not to say that anything you do for a 19-year-old who happens to be financially independent doesn't qualify as an adult. I mean, most of our 18-year-olds would be angry that they weren't called adults. But the goal is, if we want to have a consistent definition, we should know that we're talking about this group. There might be others who are similarly qualified. But for example, assuming multiple adult roles could be someone who's younger than 24, right? We know people who are caregivers to dependent parents, and they're all of 20. So that's an or. Okay, why are we interested? Well, here's some of the reasons we're interested. I think we all know that we have flattening rates or declining rates of high school graduates or seniors in high school that we're recruiting. Clearly, for institutional survival, many of us have to start to dust off our focus and start looking at adults as a group of students that we want to attract.
And these are, there's I didn't find any categories where adult learners were a net loss to an institution. They were, in everything that I looked into, they were a net gain. They took more classes, they graduated, they were persistent, everything that you see there. And the 8 times higher rate that you've heard mentioned already here today is an impressive statistic. So this is something that is good for everybody and inclusive of populations of students that might normally struggle.
So here was my thought. Having been at NIU and coming from a community college, it's very interesting to me because there are faculty at
Bless you.
at any university who have never crossed the threshold of a community college. They have no idea. Now, I came from, as I said, 2 other states. I have never seen such well-equipped, large, sophisticated community colleges until I got here. I mean, I told you I was from the largest community college in Massachusetts at 6,000. Nowhere did we have a physical plant equal to College of DuPage. Nowhere did we have some of the credentialing programs. The one thing we did have is we were the lead in health careers for Massachusetts. We trained. It was too many times I was on an examining table and the technician leans over and says, "Oh, you work at Middlesex, that's where I got my degree." Please, let's talk about that later. But you know, there's a power to the community colleges, particularly in Northern Illinois, that I think our faculty don't understand. But here was my concern, being at NIU now, and if the community colleges, as they tend to do, were very responsive to an audience that has needs, and suddenly there were these credits for prior learning that are coming on transcripts, what's going to happen when it crosses into our admissions office and they say, what the heck are these? How did they arrive at this? How did they assess it? Do I believe in it? Is it quality? Are tickets being punched? Right? And so I said, we really need to talk as a group so that people at universities, whether it's Roosevelt, whether it is NIU, are saying, we understand this. This is indeed a mutual shared vision. And they start at the community college and they come in with some technology credentials, and we are not going to start, you know, getting down in the weeds and trying to question it. And so we felt it very important that faculty get a chance to talk about it, that institutions get a chance to know what's going on, so that they can either raise questions or collaborate as early as possible so there's no unintended barriers. Because what we don't want to have is graduates with credit for prior learning coming off a community college campus trying to transfer and then being told, well, we'll accept all the credits except these because we don't know what they're about. So that was the whole goal around this idea of an Illinois Prior Learning Assessment Alliance. And so there is our definition. It's a voluntary group. We want to establish as much as possible seamless pathways. So we want to be talking to each other. We want to assist each other. So one of the goals is maybe there's a process that is so costly for one institution. Maybe there is a guest speaker or a researcher we want to bring in to talk to a group. Let's collaborate, because in this fiscal day and age, collaboration is going to let us keep some things vital. Did you want to talk more on it? I didn't finish. Go
Sorry.
back. Okay. So here's how we see it. It's more like a network of nodes, so that what the IPLA is a meeting of liaisons from groups that exist on each of the campuses. Clearly, questions about prior learning has to reside with faculty. They are the experts in their subject area. They are the ones who have to feel comfortable that what they're looking at are indeed viable credentials and substitutions for their courses. So as we envision it, a group of faculty on each campus would be working with the registrar or other academic administrators to look over proposals or decisions or processes or anything they want to put in place that will smooth the awarding of credit for prior learning to their qualified adult learners. One member of that group would join this group, so that we have updates, so that there's no one working off there and then saying, haha, we have a solution and you don't know anything about it, but the student's going to transfer, and then poor student, right? We don't want that to be the person who's inhibited. What we want is that student to say, everyone knows what I did and what's documented here, and I have a smooth pathway. So the goal is the node on your campus that would function according to your governance, looking at what your institution's comfortable with in the disciplines that are comfortable. We know that there are some disciplines that this is a foreign concept, but there are professional disciplines in which this is something they understand very well. Many of them might have gotten their training in the military. Many of them might have gotten their licenses. So they understand that someone presenting a similar credential has a valid course of study behind it. So that's where we see it's happening. It's going to happen in programs. But once a program says, we want to use this as a recruitment device, which it is, you know, you can say, we'll give you credit if you come out of, we had one with the IBEW. Right after they came out of the electrical workers apprentice program, they got a certain amount of credits towards their College of DuPage degree. Once it's agreed on that there are processes, if that student transferred to NIU, what would we see on their transcript? We have to be aware so that we could say, oh yeah, we understand the context. So that would be institutional, and then we want to come together probably twice a semester to just update each other, much as you do here, with the idea that there might be ways we can assist each other. There might be best practices you have. There might be credentials you're sort of wondering about. You might want to ask the universities, would you accept this? You know, if we did it this way. Or maybe we should all do it the same way. Or is there a way to work with CALE that would be more cost effective if a group of us worked with them together? It would just inform the process, and I think overall would create a smooth pathway for students. We are autonomous, but at the same time our students are moving through our systems. And we need to make sure that there's no barriers that crop up just because they crossed an institutional line. So part of our goals here is to recruit more people, more colleges to join us. Many of you have representatives to the committee, but the more the merrier, and frankly the more powerful. And now that the governor's office is interested, we are looking at opportunities for grants that could help us have a conference, bring in speakers, set up a system, whatever the group says, this would help us. We also want to educate faculty. We want to clarify to them that they are still in control. This is not, because that's the first thing that happens at NIU. If we talk about anything, they say, wait a minute, it's my discipline? Yeah, we say, yes, you're still in control. We need to talk about it so other people know what's going on. But it's still it resides with the faculty. So our first goal really is, as you join us, is we want to talk about an inventory. Right now, we all have different practices, I'm sure. And at NIU, some colleges have practices that other colleges don't even know about. Mm-hmm. You know, so someone would say at NIU, we don't do that at NIU. I said, well, the College of Health does it, the College of Engineering does it, the college, you know, and we'd go through a whole group and they say, oh, we didn't know that. Well, of course, that's part of the reason we have to have an institutional discussion. Or they don't consider what they do as part of this. Like, for example, we have I hope you all know, we have a bilingual initiative at NIU. A student can take an exam, and if they score high enough, they can get 12 credits in foreign language at NIU. Those people are doing credit for demonstrated competency or prior learning. They're not asking which courses did you take, but if they're fluent in a foreign language, they can take an exam and demonstrate their fluency. It is a tough exam, but there's so many of our students, especially adults, who are comfortable in 2 languages. This is a wonderful, and they don't have to pay tuition for the 12 credits. They just have to be registered with us so we can transcribe them on something. But, and I will get information out on that initiative too, but that they didn't see as credit for prior learning. But indeed it is. Is there anything on those objective lists that you would like to ask more about? Because that's really what we're proposing, is an opportunity for more institutions to participate, and we're into technology. You can participate without having to get in the car and drive to DeKalb. We have phone, we have Adobe Connect. So I do want to say that given the budget and people's restrictions on travel, this is not a restriction. You can join us through technology.
And I think, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, since you were just mentioning that initiative, is that similar to taking a CLEP exam though, but it's your own?
Yeah, it is. It's recognized foreign language fluency exam. I don't know the acronym, but it is a recognized exam. One thing I should tell you is we are a leader in Southeast Asian languages. We actually have University of Wisconsin sort of buying class seats from us for things like Thai. I think Thai and the language of Laos, I'm not sure what it's called, Tagalog, which is the Philippine language. So it's quite an extensive array of competency. One of the things we did as an institution is we studied the needs of our businesses for multilingual future employees. And as they expand, as many of them are global, the idea of Asian languages, fluency in Chinese, Japanese, this is really an important credential for some of our adults to know is valued. They might be struggling in English, but they have a chance to really show their competency in their native language to an extent that becomes a employment benefit for them. So I will get word out for that.
Will you guys speak to where the Alliance is in the process right now? I know there was a draft that went to the presidents of multiple community colleges and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
You can share that with
Right.
you.
We first decided to formalize and have an MOU, but presidents can sign up. Yes, we're committed to this. We're going to send representatives. Given the fiscal situation we're all in, there was a concern that by an MOU there might be some fiscal financial obligations. So in consultation with our president and provost, we said, let's downgrade it, make it much more comfortable. It is just an invitation to join a group, an alliance. No if we have a reason to spend money, then we'll talk about how we could get the money. Again, as I said, we think, now I should tell you that our report on adult learners went to IBHE. And I forget his first name, but Applegate? Jim. He sent it out. He said, this is an example of regional collaboration that we need to support. We will be looking to get money, funding for it. He says we are hoping that we have some adult learner focused grants that can come out. So that would be, if we got together and said, you know, we really need to bring faculty to a conference, that's what we need to have some expenses paid. I think at that point we would raise the question of who can do what, and maybe IBHE can do something for us.
And I think it's important to have that in place when the money is put up. You don't, if you sit around and say we're not going to do anything because we don't have the resources, when it comes time to apply for the resources, one of the things you have to demonstrate is that you have an active group of people, in this case the Alliance,
Right.
that is already in place and ready to move.
Right.
And I haven't been to a meeting, I'm guilty of that. I know I'm on the front lines. Most of what is driving your organization will be decisions made by the deans, the faculty, and then, I don't want to speak for everyone in this room, I'm guessing we'll be on the front lines sharing this information with the students that
Right.
we encounter. How has it been, I haven't double checked with Don Stewart at our institution yet, but how has the response been from faculty at our community college?
We have not gotten direct discussions with faculty.
Okay.
However,
Okay.
I should say that we're arranging, and this is just a general invitation, we are going to bring our faculty to College of DuPage at the end of April to talk about the mutual pathways that we are establishing. To, again, this was my initiative with Donna Stewart, who's the Dean of Business and Technology, is let's get the faculty talking to each other, because with that, not that credit for prior learning is officially on the list of topics. What they're really looking at is, you know, how are your students prepared? Are there any issues? Can they move seamlessly into our programs? What should we do to fix any barriers, et cetera? What materials do you need to let students know about our programs? But I think inevitably, if I can coach some of the COD faculty, is to say, well, we do bring in people from IBEW. And that's going to be credentialed this way on their transcript. Do you, with a BS in technology, have any obstacles that you foresee this presenting? So that we begin infusing those conversations where faculty are talking to faculty with a chance to actually get that information transferred over. There is, again, as I said, many of our faculty, here's the other thing, I want them to go to COD campus or any of your campuses, because I don't think they have in their heads the type of facilities that, and not everyone, of course, but there are faculty who have not formally ever studied at a community college. They might not live in the most affluent neighborhoods in our region. They might have, their entire academic program might have been at universities, and then suddenly they come to a campus, like this campus or many of the other campuses, and they are literally blown away. I have had faculty come back from visiting a community college as if I could have those labs. You know, our labs are so, 1960, and we have, modern labs, right? The idea that every classroom, we're getting up to that, every classroom has technology. Wow. These are things that you might have that our faculty are beginning to appreciate. So the quality. Besides that, here's another thing. We have sent to our faculty information about how many of your faculty graduated or from NIU, or are licensed through NIU, or have graduate work from NIU. So we said, if you don't believe that they know what they're teaching, shame on you. I mean, these are your graduates, right? And so therefore you prepared them and you have ultimate trust. And I don't want to make it sound like there's a bunch of hostile faculty. There are not. Many of them visited, many of them have kept on relationships with their former PhD students. Actually, one of my colleagues at NIU keeps on asking, he says, oh, Mike Drafke, he was one of ours. He graduated from NIU. So they just have to refresh their minds about what we're talking about. They are more conservative. I would say that the universities are more conservative. And in some ways, that's perhaps part of their tradition and their role, is that they don't go with the wind. They sort of trudge on, right? Whereas the community colleges are nimble and react more to local needs, to employer requests, to a flow of student interests faster. And so that's the disconnect. So the conversation, the idea of the whole alliance is that the conversation should be heard collectively, so that every institution can say, this is not a surprise. This is something we should consider. This technique that they're using makes sense to us. And so it eases it for the students. The whole idea is that these students are going to come through a continuum, and they're going to step out and then come back, and they're going to present credentials that are going to be judged both at the university and at the community college as legitimate equivalents to some of the work they'd be asked to do. And we just want to make it so that they can see they can attain the degree. Those statistics from Cale are, really incredible for some of our researchers at NIU. They didn't know any of that. Wow. So, what we're here to do is to invite you, next slide, to contact us or send the invitation to someone else on campus who needs to consider whether a dean, associate dean, a lead faculty, whoever, one of folks from your office would be, coming to our meetings and communicating back and forth across an alliance. Now, I will tell you one of my goals, my dreams is, when we went to the National Prior Adult Learning and Prior Learning Assessments Conference in New Jersey by Thomas Edison State College. I don't know if you're aware, but many of the middle states colleges have adult colleges. So Thomas Edison State College is a whole college for adults. Empire State College is the one in New York. Nutmeg State College, I think, is in Connecticut. So there are these colleges, and of course, credit for prior learning is a big deal when you're dealing only with adults. And one of the things that they did was they created a brochure for adult learners in their region that said, you might have credit already based on all those things we talked about, work, military, et cetera. And we colleges, there were 9, I think, community colleges as well as universities are a member of this group. And you can start with any of us, and your credits that are granted for your prior learning will move between us, because we've all agreed. That would be a wonderful outcome for our students, right? Is that we said all these community colleges and all these universities have said that we will accept credit for prior learning from each other. That's the dream.
I want to mention that there's a typo in Meryl's email
Oh, yeah.
that we just discovered, and so the correct email is on the board. I think there's an L and it's supposed to be a 1, so you may want to take note of that.
Yeah, we'll send it. Now, we'll make this electronically available.
The other thing is, we just have the official copy of that ready to send out electronically, so you can email Meryl or I if you want an electronic copy of this invite.
And the PowerPoint.
And we also have, if anybody's interested, I don't believe we have on there the link to the website, but all of the work that we've done is on the web, so you can go look up. We've done a report on trends and issues in prior learning assessment. We've done a paper on, the definitions for the adult learner, and all the material, all of our meeting materials, everything related to the work that we're doing is easily accessible through a nicely indexed web page that is open to anybody that wants to look at it.
Is that on our P20 network?
Yes.
Yeah, it's NIU. Just put in on the search button the P20 network. Up will come up a page, and you will see we're now called Articulation in Adult Learners. And the reason the articulation work group and the adult learner group got together, as you can see, is you're giving credit. How does it move over to this group? And of course, a part of the conversation is competency-based credit, which immediately leads into credit for prior learning, right? If you define the competencies and someone can then demonstrate the competencies, then you have a case for awarding credit. So the work of those two groups have merged. It's not just IAI anymore, though they're trying to tell IAI they better start looking at competencies instead of which textbook you use, because that's really how you're going to measure learning.
And if you go, that search box would be on the NIU page that we're talking about to do that particular search.
And any of the information that you guys, if you don't mind presenting today, we do have a LinkedIn group site, so the presentation, we'll post everything there. And
That's great.
If you're not a member, we encourage you to become a member on LinkedIn, but that's our free website right now, if you will, for this
Very nice.
organization, where
Very nice.
folks
Very
can
nice.
access information and share.
So
What's
we'll,
the name of your group on there?
You can just start typing in Illinois Community College Round.
Okay.
Start typing.
Just start typing in the name of the group. All right.
Send you an invite.
Yeah. We send out.
the other thing that I'd like to send out is that invitation that, and we'll field questions. We're in developing, making marketing materials for that career counseling / online learning experience for adult learners. So that should be available in a couple of weeks. We're thinking of offering it, I think we decided October.
Mid-September through
We figured adults,
mid-October.
you have to think about adults. They had to get their kids off to college, their kids off to high school, and now we'll start hitting them with what they can do for themselves. So we don't want to do it in the summer, family vacations.
After school has started and prior to the Thanksgiving slide into the holidays.
Right.
That's the
Yeah, we
sweet
got
spot.
about a couple of weeks, So we have time to develop it, but it might be a really good thing for us to, you have handouts and someone's going to come to you. How many times does an adult come to you and say, I need a good paying job, what pays? Without asking, what do I like to do? What have I done? And you have to start somewhere. You could say, we've got an experience that you should invest in. We're going to talk about career development for adults, to help them and meet people in the same situation, because that a sense of, I'm the only one who doesn't know this. I'm the only one who can't do this.
And we're hoping that, I'm hoping this will turn into a group that will want to remain connected. And the programs that I've developed in the past have all been cohort-based community of practice types of communities. And we're really hoping this will become a network of adult learners. So the first, if the first group is successful, we'll make sure they have an infrastructure to stay in touch, and then the second group will go through, and then as they graduate, we can put them in the larger group. And I've grown networks that are into the thousands of people by doing this over the years.
The other thing we want to offer are opportunities for research. We, of course, are a doctoral institution, and we do have graduate assistants who work on various projects. We were known, have been known for our adult and higher ed leadership programs, and so there could be a graduate assistant who can provide some resources for research on issues, or you might propose one to this group and we can decide, let's do a system. I think you're actually going to have a graduate assistant work on some of the information gathering and practices already extant at different institutions in the network. So if someone comes up and says, wouldn't it be a good idea to learn X, but we have no time and no staff to do it, John would be a good contact. He could possibly find people who say, I have a graduate student for whom this would be right in their field of study, and that might be of interest to them if they can do an article about it afterwards.
And I think that's I'm really glad you brought that up, and I think that's the type of participatory affair where what I would want to do is learn from you what the real questions are that need to be answered, and then I could provide some resources in terms of maybe how we could get at some of those answers. But like everything else, it's going to benefit from hearing the expertise that's in the field and then figuring out the right tools to measure things. And between us all, we have everything we need. No one of us or two of us has the answers. So it's just good to be in that community and be able to ask questions and share resources and things like that.
I'm going to put this out there. It's a brazen request. You mentioned this proposed online career development exploration class for adult students we come in contact with. Currently, it's not credit, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Would there ever be discussion, I'm just thinking down the line, because of the values of students we have encountered, saying, I want to explore, I don't know. I mean, we have tools through our career services office, but what I'm thinking is, I know we have a life skills or development component as part of our associate's trip. Would there ever be talk with our counterparts at the community colleges to look at that being awarded for credit? And the reason I say that is, our savvy adults don't like taking filler classes that are just meant to knock off a
Right, right.
I see this, at least in my experience, being a real value for students to have this time to explore and really get in depth to figure out what their next step is. And I love the fact that you said you would sandwich it and make it a shorter term, not
Right.
this 16-week.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm just throwing it out there. If there
Well,
are
I think
efforts
it's-
with our institution,
I think it's
there
great, and I think it's really timely, and honestly, the reason we're doing it the way we're doing it is because it was a way to clear the space to do a pilot to show that it could be effective without having to get it crunched in the gears of trying to figure out how to award credit for it and things like that. That was complicated at where, in the process, all the processes that are going on. We wanted to just do an offering. We wanted to get it out there and do it to demonstrate and learn. Maybe it won't be effective, but I have a pretty good sense that it's going to be effective. And then once that happens, then other things flow. So
Actually, one of the things that I'm impressed with Thomas Edison, and this is one of the reasons I don't want to be looking like I'm talking against Cale, but Thomas Edison State College has open sourced some of their assets. So, for example, if you want to teach a course on how to develop a portfolio for credit for prior learning, you can look it up and get it for free through Thomas Edison. Now, yes, they will sell services if you need an instructor for that class, or if you want an evaluator of the portfolio. That's the add-on. Of course, you always look for the ads in the corner, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. They said, this is, and it's customizable to your institution. It's not going to look like Thomas Edison. One of our goals is to look at perhaps having this experience when it's tested out, offered to schools and say, here, you can take this and make it an online experience for your students. Or even better, if we could share it, because we don't know that we'll each have enough enrollments for a class, but what if it was it's awarded 1 credit at COD, it's awarded 1 credit, but when students register, they're in a pool of students and we can run the class. So there's all sorts of ways where we don't have to go through our arduous curriculum approval process at the university, and where does it go, and who's losing that credit, and giving up one credit becomes, so the provost said, you know what, go ahead and offer it. Quality will rise to the top. And if it works, and if the community colleges find it useful for their audience, and we find it useful for our audiences, because we have adults who come back after 10, 15 years, and they're saying, I'm really out of contact with my next steps, then we will then sell it at that point. But we have nothing to, say to people, this is such a substantial benefit. But I think that we could rebrand it.
I don't want to step on our, I don't know what our online, and I know our online director well. I don't want to step on his.
No. This is not an entirely online experience, and I'll tell you why. John's research has shown that particularly groups of adults, right? When they come together, he's even gotten it down to 20% of the time of the course.
We had 20 years of running these programs at 3 different universities, and one thing that we tackled was, what's the minimal amount of time we can have face-to-face and still be successful? And after pushing those numbers up and down, the 20% was a very stable number. If we went above 25%, it didn't make that much difference. If you went below 20%, things really started to fall apart. And it's and 20%, you can chew that up very quickly. A Friday night, Saturday session twice a semester, you got 20%. But if these would always start as with an orientation, and in the orientation, people were fiercely opposed to the orientation. They did not want to come to the orientation. They were signing up for an online program. The reason they were signing up is because they didn't want to have to come to campus. And so there was a lot of hostility about the face-to-face. And then in the exit reflection piece, almost to a person, they said it was critical. And it was the best thing about the program, and they've made friends that they're going to stay in contact with forever. And I was sick, and somebody brought me my homework, and all the amazing stuff that happens when you bring people together. And so it can be a difficult sell at first. And I'm a distance educator, right? But it's almost indescribable how much better of an experience it is. And I think this makes common sense. If we sit and have lunch here together today somewhere, and then we get online and you send me an email, I'm going to have a completely different experience because I have the context of you as a person. I know who you are. We've talked. That makes it for a much different experience. And a 20-year average of those programs, 93% of the students completed all of their courses, and 84% of them got their master's degrees. These were master's programs for educators who wanted to get an emphasis in technology.
So the goal is we would bring it out to our regional centers, and it would be reasonably accessible for adults. And the importance we feel is, and if you did it on your campus, we would probably suggest that you bring them together for that initial meeting, because how many of us feel comfortable responding to someone we've never met? How much more comfortable we are with, oh, it's so nice talking to you about your pet, about your vacation, and here's the assignment, or could you join our group for this? And that has worked, and particularly for adults, because they sit out there and they say, everyone else must be so comfortable with this technology. I'm the only one that's having trouble figuring out how to get online. No, when they're all together and they're learning it together, the light bulbs go on and they feel like they're supported. So that's the format right now, is to have staged meetings where students are together and then interspersed with online. We do not, John has pointed out, because I've listened to the conversations, he's in the office next to me, they don't want us to have necessarily an opening and a closing meeting, because then people are on their own, for this, 4 weeks. What if they get lost in the second week? Are they going to admit it? So they rather have, a meet together, an assignment, meet together, review how it went, and build up towards that online expertise and comfort.
And
it's well thought out from educators.
In every electronic environment that you would use online, they're going to explore while we're together. So we'll do a practice live session where you have to use headphones and things like that. So when they get off on their own, they'll have already been successful once. And that's usually enough to get the meaty part of the curve over the hump. You know, a lot of people, they're one step away, they're one tip away, they're one strategy away from being successful. But if they never get that, then they stay where they are.
Are there any other questions? Because I know we're sort of over our time. Okay. Any other questions? So next steps, simple. You might want to we have some extra, the two-sided page on, well, I'll correct my email address. If you want to disperse them to the people you think should know on the campus, just have them send us an email that say, we're, X community college is very interested in participating, keep us on the list. Again, we facilitate every meeting through technology for those people for whom distance is now a barrier. So we really don't want that to be a problem. And people come in and out, but we have had a very consistent group. So I think that they feel that we're talking about important things. Well, thank you.